there. So I'm so excited because I think we'll be able to put finishing touches on and actually see this painting finished today. So I decided that I want to put a tree. I decided I want to add another tree that's going to go right up through here. There's only 2 right now, but I think that the composition will be stronger if I add a 3rd tree up through here. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. And then we're going to add a little bit of glaze in the water and just a few final touches and details, and then the painting will be finished. Hey there, Tristan. So I'm mixing titanium white and raw umber. And I'm going to use this combination of titanium white and raw umber with some liquid medium to make a warm gray color. And I'm just going to pull that tree just in a really nice curvy way, just straight up to the sky. And I'll add a little bit of texture on the tree, but because it's fairly far away from the viewer, I don't want to overdo it with the texture. We always want our trees to get a little smaller as they go up, just because that's how they grow. It always looks a little bit unnatural if a tree is wider at the top than at the bottom, so that's always something to be mindful of. One of my friends was telling me that he was at the lake painting in plein air this week. That sounds like so much fun. He said he started a painting outside looking at the lake and took some pictures and brought it back home and finished it up that way. That's one of the most relaxing things to do, and this time of year is perfect for it. And we live in such a beautiful, beautiful place. Now I'm using some just titanium white. I still have a little bit of the raw umber in my brush. And I just want to give a hint that the tree has a little bit of texture. It's already lost its leaves. Trees are a lot easier to paint without leaves. A little less texture. Got a little too much paint on there, so I'm going to pick up my dry brush and just push that right back over. And while I'm at it, I'm going to skinny up that tree trunk just a little bit. Alright, so I think that's enough for that tree. I add a few more little details in the other 2 trees before I call it officially done. But I want to move on now. I want to move on down here to the water and a few little highlights in the creek bank here. I'm going to mix into my titanium white. I'm going to mix some burnt sienna, real pretty fall color, and that's mixture of burnt sienna and white is the color of these fallen leaves that have made their way down here to the moss. I'm going to add just a little yellow ochre and a little more titanium white. I didn't have my color light enough, but I really want to get some of that texture in there. That opaque texture is going to be a nice contrast to the transparency of the water. And I'm looking at my reference picture, I'm looking at where the leaves are, but I'm not getting too caught up in detail because I really want my viewer's eye to really just kind of hang out here in the water. Just want to have a little bit of texture on there. Now I'm going to leave this brush for my light colors, And I'm going to pick up another brush so that I can add a few dark contrasting areas of texture and shadow between and around these leaves. I'm going to let some of that green come through, because it really, in this landscape, it looks like the moss is just kind of glowing, and I really don't want to lose that effect. But I need to create the illusion that there are some leaves on this creek bank, and I definitely don't want my creek bank to take away from the water, so I need to create that contrast in textures. I want my water to be smooth and transparent. I want my creek bank to have opaque objects on it, and maybe the moss looks like it's glowing a little bit, but definitely want to have some differences. Okay, now I'm going to switch to a little bit of sap green and build up some of the color on some of these mossy rocks. Sap green is a transparent color, fairly transparent, and I love building up layers and layers so that it looks really, really deep. Of course, you can add black or blue or other colors to it, but you get that rich color when you just build up layers and let it dry and add another layer. That's how you get that real deep green moss. I think that's one of the prettiest things about the creeks here where we are. A little bit more green on this mossy rock. And while I'm at it, building up this green color, I'm going to come back in just a minute with some lemon yellow and accentuate the moss here on top of this rock. And I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white in there to make it just a little more opaque, because lemon yellow is a very, very transparent color. I see Katie's watching. Hey there. So I'm finishing this painting up today, and I'm going to work on a different painting next week. So I want to get input about what you might like to see happen next week. I'm new at this Instagram Live, so I'm not sure what you might want to see. And I have a few ideas that I'll share with you. And if you have an idea of something you would like to see, then please let me know. Okay, I'm going to go back. I've got this brush light, so I'm going to set it down and save it in case I need some more of that color, and get a different brush, because I want to use some raw umber, and I want to create a little dark spot here, a little shadow on the side of this rock that's very warm. Add a little burnt sienna up here. I love the contrast between burnt sienna and sap green. That's one of my favorite contrast combinations, especially with moss. I think it may be a little area of dead moss where we see the burnt sienna, but there's almost always undertones of that orangey red burnt sienna color, and it's such a nice contrast to the sap green and the moss. Alright, now I'm going to pick up my little liner brush here. This is a little small round brush with long soft bristles, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to load it with a lot of liquid medium. I'm using oils, and I'm going to put just a little titanium white mix that titanium white into my liquid medium, and just the tiniest little amount of phthalo blue, barely enough to see. And now what I've made is a transparent mixture with white and phthalo blue and a lot of liquid medium, and I'm going to use that to make these highlights in the water. I've built up my glazes. I started with raw sienna in the background of the water because that's the color of wet sand. Hey Maggie! That's the color of wet sand. And then I added some sap green and some burnt umber because that's kind of the color that, you know, the water, if you put it in a cup, that's the color that you're going to see. And so I built up layers for the last 3 weeks, and they've all dried. And now it's time to do the fun part and put the reflections on the surface of the water. And this is the last thing that we'll need to do in this painting, and then it'll be finished. It's always so much fun when they finally come together. So I'm just barely pulling the bristles of this long, thin liner brush across the surface of the panel. I'm painting on a wooden panel here as opposed to a canvas. I really like the surface because it's smooth. And I feel like I can do more with layers and with glazing. I discovered wooden panels on a trip to Charleston. That's my favorite place to go and look at art. And I kept seeing all these amazing paintings, and the one thing they all had in common was that they were on these smooth panels. So after I did a little bit of research, I started using wooden panels and never looked back. Alright, so I'm using just a very, very thin glaze made of titanium white and a tiny little bit of phthalo blue, and it's so thin because I've thinned it with liquid medium. And now I'm just barely touching the paintbrush to the surface of the water, just enough to get those subtle little reflections that give the viewer the idea that it's reflecting light. And I started this process here in this little waterfall last week, and I'll add another layer because it's brighter in that waterfall because, you know, the water's white water trickling down through there. So when I get to that part, I'll use more titanium white and less liquid on my brush. I've been working from background to foreground, so I put the color of the wet sand and the color of the water in there, and then all of that has dried. So now I'm layering the final details. So now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to use more of my titanium white, and I'm just going to build up so that when my viewer looks at the painting, hopefully the eye settles on this little waterfall flowing down through here. So just building that up, and the layer that was already on there is dry. I wouldn't be able to do this if that layer had not been already on there and drying since last week. So this water's very white down here. It creates that foam when the water hits this, when the water falls down there, and just creates all those bubbles that catch the light, and it gets really, really white through there. Same thing happens in this other little trickle. I'm going to add just another little bit of detail on there. And then here where the water bounces. And this is nice because the water's really deep under the rock here because, you know, it's been carved out by the pressure. And so that gives, we were able to get a nice dark color in there when we did our glazes to contrast this white. And that's one of the things we want in order to draw the viewer's eye. Contrast. contrast and sharp edges, and we have both. I'm going to use a dry brush now to soften a few of those edges. This brush has no paint on it. I want the edge to be a little bit softer. Okay, a few more little a few more little reflections here. The water catches the light as it makes ripples out from that little waterfall. So I want to add those subtle little reflections on there. And then I'm going to be finished. It always feels good to finish a painting after working on it for a few weeks. I may add just a few more little details, but I think I'll sign this painting today. And like I said, I'm new to doing this Instagram Live. It's fun. I like checking in with people. What would you like to see next? A lot of times, if I've worked on a wooden palette like I've done here, I'll turn the palette into a canvas and I'll paint a picture here using the paint that's left, and then that will become a work of art. If you'd like to see a palette painting, let me know that. If another idea that I'm thinking about is, this is a coloring page that I just drew for my Patreon. Hey Pam! This is a coloring page I just drew for my Patreon patrons, and what I'd like to do is use some silver leaf and charcoal. I don't know if you can see this work in progress, but I want to turn this drawing into a charcoal and silver leaf piece. So if you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments. And if you have another idea, like maybe more landscape or just anything you can think of, just let me know and I'll do my best to make it happen. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next Wednesday.